Hi everyone, I'm Glenna with Continuing Education at CU Boulder, coming to you from Facebook Live. My guest tonight is going to share her experience about getting ahead even when you change your major. Lucie Farnham, thank you so much for being here tonight.
Thanks for having me.
So I thought I would start the conversation by asking you to share a little bit about your background and how you came to study at CU Boulder.
Okay, so I'm originally from the East Coast up in New England, and when I was looking at colleges, I initially wanted to go west. I didn't really know where. I was kind of looking in California, but I really didn't know exactly what I wanted. And my dad came to CU as an undergrad, and he really enjoyed his time here, so he just offered, like, maybe let's go to a football game. And as soon as we came out here, I fell in love with it, and I really haven't looked back since.
Okay. Well, when you first came to CU Boulder, did you know what you wanted to study? Like, you know, it sounds like you were definitive about CU Boulder's where I want to be, but did you know your path?
I didn't at all, and I think that's why, as we'll go on to, like, how I got led into continuing education. But I initially came into CU as a business major, which I kind of just applied for because I didn't know exactly what I was interested in studying.
Okay.
I knew my sister was a business major in the past, and I figured I might as well give it a shot. And I think as soon as I enrolled in those freshman classes and I started going, by the end of the first semester, I knew that it wasn't the right path for me. So that's when I kind of came to terms with the fact that this isn't the right path, but what are my other options? So then I started to look at other majors that I could possibly be interested in, and so then I enrolled in as a sociology major, while also emphasizing in education, specifically elementary education.
Okay. Well, I'd like to delve into that a little bit more because, you know, I think this is a common experience for a lot of students who come in thinking that they're going to do one particular major, and then after taking a few classes they're like, oh, this is really not what I want. So can you talk a little bit about how you approached thinking about changing majors, you know, and what you ultimately settled on, sociology and education?
So when I was a business major freshman year, I was also a freshman. So being a freshman, I didn't know exactly where to go about something like this. So I went to my advisor, and she told me that it's maybe time to switch, and so she gave me some options of other majors. So I did look at sociology, and then we also, like, kind of dove into what comes after that. Once you choose this major, what are the next steps? What are the classes that I need to take from then on? And so that's when I started to come to realize, like, the next path that I would have to take.
Okay. Well, and so in talking to your advisor about, you know, what classes you're going to need to take, how you make that pivot, how did you decide that continuing education courses were the right fit?
So that didn't come along, I think, till the end of my sophomore year. So I had a full school year being a sociology major while also studying elementary education as well. That's when I kind of started to think about online summer classes. And initially I stayed in Boulder for the summer, which is something new. I normally would just go home back to the East Coast, but I chose to stay. So with that being said, I thought about maybe taking campus summer classes. And then as I talked to my advisor again, she was a great resource for me. I realized how that wasn't financially the best solution for looking at online classes. So we talked about continuing education, and I was also looking at online classes, but I was looking at, like, CU's on, like, the on campus.
Yeah, was it through summer session?
Yes, exactly. Yeah, so those are different, and those still I think they come with tuition as well. So that being said, I was looking at continuing education classes as probably the most financially reasonable decision for myself as an out-of-state student. So seeing those classes being, like, financially reasonable for myself and my family situation, that was the best option for myself.
Okay. Well, and there's a piece here that I think is really important too, because you've taken a full year's worth of business classes that didn't transfer well, right, into your newfound major. And so you had described to me earlier, realizing that you had credits that you needed to make up.
Right.
And especially with the education, the teacher licensure part of this, there was a very specific timing sequence that you needed to follow. So how did online classes help you kind of accelerate that track that you decided on when you decided to make that change?
So as I kind of studied a little bit more about what classes I would need to take to finish my sociology major as one thing, and then also my elementary teaching licensure as another thing, another completely different component, all of which don't apply to business. So that really felt like, to me, as I went into my sophomore year, I felt like I was really behind, and I felt like I was behind everybody else, and I was just behind as a whole. But that's why I saw continuing education as an opportunity for me in the first summer to get ahead on the core classes that I needed to take as just a general education.
Sure.
So, and then I think the following, this past spring as a junior, I was talking to my advisor, and I was kind of thinking about how as an elementary licensure student, they ideally would like seniors to graduate all of their their main major classes by the end of the fall, and then spend that spring semester just student teaching with no classes, no online classes, nothing, just student teaching. So that was a particularly daunting kind of idea for me, especially coming in a little bit late. So in my head, that was never something that I could do. It was more like I would push it all off another semester. So for a while, I just never really thought about it. And then this past semester, I was talking to my advisor, and I was like, is there any possible way that I could squeeze this in and I could student teach by spring of my senior year? And he told me that one of the only options was taking continuing education classes and taking them online, taking online self-paced courses over the next 6 months that I could complete on my own if I felt like I could be productive enough and manage my time properly. So that's how I came to think about, this could be possible, this could happen. I could finish my sociology major by fall, student teach in the spring.
Okay. Well, this seems like a good time then to kind of move forward and talking about what your experience was, both in regular sort of term-based online classes and self-paced. So I'd first like to ask, before you enrolled in online classes, what did you think the experience was going to be, and what questions did you have?
Before going into my first summer of taking online classes, I was kind of nervous, honestly. I'd asked some students that were older than me what their experience was like taking online classes, and most of them told me that they were hard, that it's going to be difficult, you're not going to feel like you have any time, things like that. But I think all in all, it's more about yourself as a student and seeing how you can manage your time and knowing yourself before you get into these classes and knowing what's going to happen. And I think, in the summer, it's kind of hard for anybody. It's the summer. Nobody wants to be inside studying for an online exam. So I think that the first summer taking those online classes as a term-based, it was eye-opening because I realized that it wasn't so bad. I actually did have time to take them all. I did 2, and I had the time because I was working, but I was also, for me, I was able to do some of my homework at work. That I was lucky enough to be able to do that, but I also found that I did have time outside of that. It was more myself being able to productively put that time aside ahead of time and think about it beforehand, rather than like on the spot remembering, I have an exam tomorrow. And that's the difference between online classes and in-person classes, is there's no one really telling you face to face something is due, an exam is tomorrow, things like that.
Yeah. Well, so it sounds like you expected the classes to be harder because you heard from peers and classmates that it was.
Yeah.
And that ultimately, I mean, it sounds like you still found the experience rigorous, but manageable.
Yeah.
Which is great. Was there anything else, different than what you expected it to be?
I think in terms of that question, I think more about the online self-paced course that I took.
Yeah.
I started one, so as soon as I had that advisor meeting this past spring, being like, I'm gonna finish this all by next fall. I'm gonna finish everything. He told me to try to enroll into a 6-month self-paced course. And he's like, you can finish it as long as you think that you are going to be productive enough to do this. Because for a lot of students, that end of that 6 months comes really fast and you didn't do a lot of the work. So he was more just like, do you think that you can handle this? It was not like, these are hard. It's more like, can you do this on your own? It's a completely independent kind of class, which is something new that I had never taken. And so I enrolled in that, I think, this past April, I would say, or March. And I was being like the kind of like neat freak that I am and perfectionist. I was like, I'm gonna get it all done. I'm gonna get it done as fast as I can so I don't have to think about it in the next 6 months. So I pretty much cranked it out. Like every weekend I would spend like a few hours and I would just try to finish those classes as best as I could. And I was able to finish that online self-paced course within 2 months, which is something I don't know if I was like trying to do that, but it was something I'm proud of myself, but it was also like, it was eye-opening for me to see that I could do that and that I could do that. And it's also nice to know, like, for the future after I leave college, that I do have the time management skills when I go on to my next career.
Yeah, totally. Well, I mean, so I would say for students watching, self-paced courses can be an incredibly powerful option. But as your advisor pointed out, like, you really do need to be disciplined and focused to get it done. But I mean, I think you're demonstrating the power of being able to knock out more credits on a timeline that works for you.
Exactly.
Yeah. So, well, I'm wondering, so you had started taking online classes, and then it sounds like you found that they really worked for you, and you continued to use them semester over semester.
So I planned on doing some this summer because, again, I'm currently still trying to finish by the end of this upcoming fall all my sociology credits. So that being said, especially with the education school as well, they have a very structured way that they would like your classes to be taken as an elementary licensure student. So there's like a specific set of 3 classes that I have to take before I student teach. So it's not like I had the ability to be flexible with that schedule. So sociology, I was able to do that with continuing education. So this summer I am taking 2 term-based and then 1 online self-paced. So I started that online self-paced, I think, in May, and I started it and I was doing pretty well at the beginning, and then I kind of, because of these 2 term-based classes that I'm taking, I've kind of taken a little break. And I think that that's the beauty of those self-paced courses, that I'm able to take a two-ish month break from it, and then I can also pick it up as soon as these classes are done. Because I still have time, and I know from my past experience of doing a self-paced course that I can crank it out. I can do it. It's just going to take some focus and a lot of hard work.
Yeah, well, knowing yourself, I think that's a really important thing too.
Yeah.
So, well, I want to invite anybody who's watching now. If you have questions about Lucie's experience or things that you'd like to ask her, please enter your questions in the Facebook comment section, and we will share them with Lucie. It looks like we have a few coming in already, so I want to ask, did you work with a continuing education advisor during your time, or was it mainly your main campus advisor that kind of helped you map out this path?
It was mainly my sociology advisor.
Okay.
He luckily was very knowledgeable about continuing education courses. which was really helpful. And otherwise, I totally would have reached out to a continuing education advisor, but I was lucky enough that I had my sociology advisor.
Okay. Well, that's great to hear. I'm glad. So it looks like we have another question. Do you have any tips or tricks for time management?
I am a big planner, so I have like a big calendar in my room, and so I always write immediately. Like if I have an assignment due, if I have an exam due within the next few weeks, I write it down immediately, and I'm always kind of looking at that calendar. I also have it in my phone. I have the same exact thing in my phone, so I'm always putting things in and making sure I remember, and I have reminders on my phone. So that to me is how I just keep track of what's next. And so I'm just aware, like, oh, I have a paper due next Sunday. I'm going to spend this day doing it. I just specifically plan, because if I don't, then I'm going to be put on the spot at some point, and it's just harder for me. And then I also found that it's less likely for me to find more time for myself, and that way I can have a time where I'm going to work on this paper, and then I'm also going to take time just to chill out, because that can be hard for a lot of students to find that time to just relax and have that self-care moment.
Totally. That's a great bit of advice. Well, I'm wondering if we can unpack some more strategies and tips that you use, because I think you've shared a lot of really useful information for other students. But I'm really curious to know, so what have you learned through this entire experience that you wish you'd known at the beginning of it?
I think I wish I knew that time is not that big of a deal. That the 4 years that college is supposed to be is not that big of a deal. It's not that structured. And I think that when I went into school, I was had this idea, you need to finish in 4 years. And I think I still do have that mindset, and that's kind of why I've been rushing myself and pushing myself to finish all these courses in this set of time. But it's also important to remember that you have more time than that. And I think that was what was scary for me, and I didn't want to spend an extra year if all my friends were going to leave, things like that. So I think that's something that I've mostly thought about, just you don't have to rush. And these continuing education classes have really allowed me to be able to finish and give me that opportunity to complete things on time, which is so awesome. And I also think that it's important to remember that you can take these classes whenever. You can take these classes a year later. You can take these classes. I can take them. I wish I could take them in the spring, but unfortunately I won't be able to. But possibly in the summer, if I don't think I'm done, or if I don't think I'm finished at CU, I might keep taking them.
Well, I'm really glad to hear you say that, because I think a lot of undergrads come in with a very particular expectation for what college is supposed to look like. And I think they're really hard on themselves when it doesn't turn out the way that they expected. And the truth is that there's a lot of ways to approach education. And then the phrase that's coming to mind for me is there's a lot of ways to skin a cat. And so it's true, right? That there are options available to you, and don't be too hard on yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Well, sort of building on that, I'm wondering if what in your mind is the most important thing that you have learned that you would want to share with other students who are trying to achieve their own goals?
I have found, I think that through all the classes I've taken, whether they're in class or online, self-paced or term-based, I've just found that all of this is part of the process to getting to the next step. So there's always a next step that you're going to go to, and I think that through the classes I've taken, the many classes I've taken at this point, it's kind of just each of them has kind of shaped me in some sort of way. Those business classes, as much as they don't seem important on my transcript, they're important because they showed me that wasn't the route for me. But I also learned a lot from those classes. So I think that just taking each moment, especially as a college student where it only lasts so long, remembering how important all these steps are to getting to the next part of my life, which is going to be hopefully a career soon.
Yeah. Well, I want to get to that in a second, but I have one more question. So it sounds like you've kind of used continuing ed classes as a hack of sorts. So I'm wondering, like how you might communicate the benefit that you've gotten from CE, this sort of hack, for other out-of-state students, because we have a large population of them on campus, and I think that their experience is unique to them. So, talk a little bit about that.
I think economically, I think that's the biggest thing, is the financial reasonableness of these continuing education classes for out-of-state students. Just having the ability to take these classes just by class, thinking about it like that, rather than as a whole part of a giant school. It just kind of sounds scary to me sometimes, thinking about it as a whole, part of CU as a tuition, as part of the whole campus. And I think that these CE classes have been a really cool opportunity for me to see that it can be a piece by piece puzzle, that I can just maneuver myself and figure it out as I go.
Yeah.
That answers your question.
Yeah, well, I think you'd mentioned earlier that CE classes were budget friendly for you,
right?
Because you could do it piecemeal. And
so, exactly.
Well, so the question is, what's next for you? I mean, you're going into your senior year.
Yep.
So
So this fall, because I've done all these classes, and I'm hopefully going to finish that self-paced course by November, I will graduate from my sociology major by the end of the fall, and then I will begin student teaching in January of 2020, which is kind of crazy. So I spend that whole semester just student teaching in an elementary school. Still through, the student teaching program is still through CU's education school, but it's exciting. So then after that, hopefully I can get placed in an elementary school, or also I've been thinking about maybe staying here. I don't really know exactly what I want to do. I still don't know. Even through everything, I still don't know what I'm going to do next summer. So I've been playing with the idea of possibly getting into social work, possibly even going back east, which is kind of crazy to think about, but maybe going home. I don't know. It's very up in the air at the moment.
Okay, well, no matter what you do, I wish you best of luck in all of your endeavors.
Thank you.
And thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us and share your experience. Really appreciate it.
Yeah.
So,
of course.